Vaughn will just start the recording. Zach is going to do like an intro. He'll do like our podcast intro, and then I'll take over and I'll just be the host, and you and I will just have a conversation.
This video was sponsored by EasyVPN. Stick around to the end of this video to learn more.
Does that work?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. Awesome. Take it away, Zach.
Hey everyone, welcome to this special episode. We have Ravil Nugmanov in the right-hand corner, and in the left-hand corner we have Walker Reynolds. And today we're going to be talking about OPC as supported by Ravil, and MQTT supported by Walker Reynolds. I'm Zach Scriven, the host, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off and let the debate start.
Excellent. Awesome. So for the community, real quick. So this podcast is been a few weeks in, took us a few weeks to put it all together, but this podcast was put together a couple of weeks ago so that Ravil is a new member to the Industry 4.0 community. Ravil is you're the founder and one of the architect software developer for One Way Automation, which is an OPC Foundation member. You guys make OPC Ua products, and obviously I'm obviously known for saying, listen, OPC Ua is not the future of IIoT. That's my stance. And so Ravil and I and the community, we've had a great back and forth going on in the Industry 4.0 Discord server. And what we decided to do was, hey, why don't we just do it as a podcast? And Ravil can ask me any questions. We can have this conversation about OPC Ua, MQTT. You know, where do they interoperate? Where is OPC Ua's role in Industry 4.0? Where is MQTT's role? Where do they overlap? Where is it you have to make decisions? Oh, I could go here or I could go there, and why should I make the decision to go one way or the other? So, Ravil, I appreciate you coming on to the podcast. Just so you know, I have been asking for a couple of years for someone who's a really active member in the OPC Foundation. That is primarily like one of the vendors who makes OPC products, to come on the podcast and have a conversation about OPC Ua and MQTT, right? And you're the first person to actually ever take me up on the offer. So I appreciate that. I really do. And I think that this conversation will be a really valuable one for the community and will help shed light on, questions that we have to constantly answer, because people will ask the question all the time, why not OPC Ua or why MQTT, et cetera, et cetera. But with that, why don't you quickly introduce yourself and what's your background, where are you from, what do you do?
Okay. Right now I am located in Edmonton, Canada. We have around 9 or 10 degrees Celsius outside, so it's not very it's not very hot here. In regard to OPC, I started working on OPC products first with a classic at Matricon in 2006 up to 2013, and starting from around 2007 I started work on OPC Ua. And by the way, at that time at Matricon we were working, one of the products was a universal OPC Ua server, OPC server, which was the very first product, OPC Ua product certified by OPC Foundation. And then later I worked for some time with GE, General Electric. They have an office here in Edmonton. And starting from 2016, I work in my own company, One Way Automation, and providing custom software development services, and also offering some products. One is OPC Ua C++ client SDK, and another is OGAM Visual Logger for OPC, which is the tool to collect data from OPC Ua servers and push into different time series databases. So this is my background.
Excellent. So how long have you been a member of the Industry 4.0 community? So how long ago did you join the Industry 4.0 Discord server?
I can't remember exactly, maybe around year, maybe.
Okay.
No, I think no longer.
And you've obviously been watching our content for a couple of years, because I remember one-way automation. I think when we shot the original OPC is not the future of IIoT video, one-way automation commented on that video and raised some objections, and then I responded to that in comments. So you've obviously been watching the content for a long time, right?
Yes, yes. I remember that video. OPC
Yeah.
is not future of IIoT.
So what caused? So you've become much more vocal in the community lately, right? In the last month, is basically the way that I can tell. What has changed? What has changed to, where you initiated this conversation so that we could have this meeting? What changed? Was there something specific I said recently in the last 6 or 8 weeks, or what changed to have you speak up?
I think nothing significantly changed. Maybe I had some extra time to join conversations, and it was like somehow challenging to hear these sentences or statements about OPC Ua that it's not backbone of IIoT, it is not open, it is not report by exception, it is not lightweight, and it is not edge driven. But I cannot tell too much about edge driven. But in all other statements, for me, they look like provoking or just not true, maybe. And I was continuing to hear that again, and as you mentioned, one time I just replied on that YouTube video, and now again, like it's almost the same thing. And I thought actually these statements are at least arguable, if not
sure.
To the house.
So why don't we go ahead and define that, right? So I'll say that I say all the time that the prerequisites. So here's my position. My position is OPC Ua is not the future of IIoT, okay? And the reason why is because it's not 4 things. And when I say it's not 4 things, I mean it's not these 4 things absolutely. That means in every case, it is these 4 things, okay? And let me say this before I go forward. I'm an engineer and a software developer and an architect, and I architect huge systems. I mean, what made me famous, or in the community, is I was the lead engineer on the largest standalone SCADA system ever built in the world. And it's still to this day the largest standalone system ever built. And it was done in 18 months, 11 million tags, 2,000 concurrent users, 2 million daily alarms. And we did it all without MQTT. We actually did it with, HTTP and WebSockets, over a gateway area network is the way that we were able to make this possible. Okay. The MQTT, had it been available in the platform at the time, would have made our job, we could have probably cut that project down to a year and be done with the entire project, covering 5 states, 40,000 PLCs, 14,000 sites. We could have probably done everything in 12 months, which, by the way, is unheard of. If that's an OPC Ua architecture, you're never going to integrate 40,000 PLCs integrate 40,000 PLCs, integrate 2,000 users, create 11 million tags or variables in OPC speak. You're not going to create 11 million variables and get through FAT and SAT for $1.6 million and in 12 months or 18 months. It's just not possible. The reason we know that is because when that project was quoted by Wonderware and Rockwell. They quoted against us, and their one of the quotes was 50 times what our quote was, and one of them was nearly 100 times. So we were talking 100 million, 100 million plus in one case, 50 million plus in another case, 1.6 million was what we quoted, right? That project is really what made us. I mean, I didn't quote it, by the way. It was I was just the engineer who led it. when we started doing our content, when we started shooting our content, what we wanted to do was teach the community of controls engineers, software developers, and industry professionals what we had learned, what technology is there, and what are the potentials. Because once we were able to do that with this project, what we realized was that so many other projects in the past that were passed over because they were going to take too long or cost too much money, they now become financially feasible if you use the right technology and build the right architecture, use the right tools, right? And so we wanted to communicate this to the world. I will openly admit that I generalize in my content. And the reason I do that is because I'm not just speaking to the Ravils of the world. You are obviously an adept and advanced developer. But the vast majority of the people who are watching our content, they're coming to our content because they want to understand, they want people to simplify it for them. And that's what I'm doing. And so when I say OPC UA is not the future of IIoT because it doesn't meet these 4 requirements, I'm saying it doesn't meet these 4 requirements absolutely. So number 1, it's not lightweight. Why is it not lightweight? Because how heavy a protocol is relative to what else is available in the market. And if I compare OPC UA with MQTT on face value, before we even get into report by exception or anything, MQTT is far lighter weight than OPC UA. At minimum, the bare minimum number is 30%, 30 to 40% more lightweight than OPC UA is. And I recognize that in most line level applications or area level applications or even plant level applications, that 30 or 40% is probably negligible. But in enterprise class implementations for each level, so for each time I'm relaying data to a new level in the organization, that weight becomes exponential, right? So we multiply, that impact is exponential. It's not plus plus, it's times. So when I say it's not lightweight, I'm saying it's not lightweight relative to what's available. Number 2, it's not report by exception. Not because you can't do report by exception in OPC UA, it's because without subscriptions, there is no report by exception. Well, let me back up. Without subscriptions or PubSub, so not and PubSub, but either or, without setting up a subscription or without PubSub, you don't have report by exception in OPC UA. And that means that all of the explicit reading in OPC UA, all your explicit read stuff, that's all none of that's report by exception. That's all deterministic. It's all discrete, right? So that's number 2. Number 3, it's not open architecture, okay? Here's what I mean by open architecture. Open architecture is not the ability to access data and models. That's not open architecture. Open architecture is the application of accessing data and models. And because of the complexity of the standard, because of the implementations of OPC UA, while OPC UA the mission is to be interoperable and open, in practice, it is not for many people. It is open for people like Ravil, who you sit on the working groups, you write the products, you write the code, right? You know how to implement open. But people like us, the people who do the projects, that isn't something we're able to achieve, right? Report by exception, lightweight, open architecture, and what's the last one? I did them in the wrong order.
Edge-driven.
Edge-driven. So let's get to edge-driven. And because I know that there's some confusion on edge-driven. Edge-driven means that the model, the data that goes into our ecosystem is the connection is instantiated from the node. Okay, so in OPC UA, it would be the client. Okay, the client instantiates the connection and drives the changes up into the ecosystem. They're not requested or browsed or anything like that. And here's the key element of edge-driven. If I make a change to my data in a node, that is, I add an object or I add a tag or I add a data type, I don't have to then go into the ecosystem and on that end either request the update for that new stuff, or I have to do some development on the server side to retrieve that new thing. What I can do is it just, as soon as I create it, it's pushed into the ecosystem. And if we use topic namespaces, right, which OPC UA has, if I use a topic namespace, clients that are monitoring that namespace through Wildcard subscriptions will see that new data type, that new topic, that new piece of data. So that's edge driven. And the reason edge driven matters is in these really huge systems, the idea that what we're going to do is write a program and then go and build an HMI and we'll map the faceplate in the HMI to the object inside our program is not scalable. Why? Because organizations are always changing all day long. We know that in Industry 4.0, what you want today is a function of what you know today. And if Industry 4.0 is about exponentially increasing the collective knowledge of an organization, then it follows that what you know will change exponentially. And therefore, what you want will change exponentially. And so what we have to do is create an architecture that allows us, if we're going to add something, all the things that rely on that something are just going to update automatically. That's edge driven. And we call that self-aware SCADA. So if I take a pH sensor and I move it from this place in my process to this other place in my process, I don't have to then go to my SCADA system and move the object from this place on the screen to this other place on the screen. It updates by itself. That's edge driven. So anyway, that's the background. The background is when I say OPC UA is not the future of IIoT, that's what I'm saying. So which parts of those do you object to and what can I provide clarification on?
Okay. After going over discussions on the Discord server, I got some more idea what you mean on these terms. But initially, it was like very somehow unexpected. For example, the sentence OPC UA is not the future of IIoT. And when you see it's not, and it somehow implies that somebody told OPC UA is the future of IIoT and you are opposing. But first of all, I don't think that somebody said that OPC UA is the future of the whole IIoT. I would say OPC UA is a part of the industry 4.0. And if you look at the requirements for the solutions or technology used in industry 4.0, if you search, for example, backbone, is there something backbone here? You would not find the word backbone probably. In other statement you were saying was OPC UA is not backbone. And first of all, maybe nobody claims that OPC UA is something, the whole future. But I would say OPC UA is certainly part of industry 4.0. And it doesn't mean that everywhere you have to use OPC UA in communication between all components. Although I think that would be possible. That would be possible. Just maybe there are no such products with such capabilities. But all like the specification itself, from theoretical point of view at least, it has everything to be used as inter-process communication tool or protocol, and it can be used to communicate between different components at different levels up to the cloud. And so I would say OPC UA certainly has a place in industry 4.0.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I don't have any. Yeah.
And probably nobody even thought that we would use everywhere OPC UA. But if I was given such a task, can you integrate ERP or MES system with SCADA or HMI using OPC UA? If as a developer I was given such a task, I think it would be perfectly possible, because you can subscribe and get data changes, just read, write. You can get it through subscriptions, regular ones, and you can get transfer data over PubSub. And if you need to call methods, remote procedure call, it's here. You can call methods, and then even you can transfer files and big files. You can transfer files with OPC Ua. You can, if you want, even you can upgrade firmware using it. You can over OPC Ua configure PLCs, and company specifications have such a like standards. How would you configure PLC, for example? It's all defined on standards.
So what you would ask the question, who said that OPC Ua is the future? The answer is many people who are members of the OPC Foundation. I'm trying to find the email that Stefan Hopp sent to me. That's exactly what he said in his email. He sent me multiple emails objecting to what I was saying. And when I asked him to come on and let's do a podcast, he did not agree to do that. And here's why he didn't agree. Because I would destroy him. I would destroy him in a debate. And here's why. It has nothing to do. Stefan is a smart guy. I like Stefan. But we're talking about the merits of the argument here, right? Another person is Eric Barnstadt from Microsoft. He said that OPC Ua is the future of IoT. And in fact, he said that that's the reason OPC Ua was created. And that's why it was codified in 2008. Well, the problem is, I want to say a couple of points. Well, let me ask you one other question before I make my point, which is, or bring that up. You've obviously had a chance now to research MQTT in detail over the last few weeks in preparation for this. I know that you had looked at it before,
yes.
But
yes.
I'm assuming you've read the Sparkplug spec all the way through. I don't doubt that you have, because you obviously are an engineer and you like to know stuff, so you would do that, right? As of today, going into this conversation, you and I are both in agreement that OPC Ua and MQTT they're siblings in the same ecosystem. They have a place in the ecosystem. There are a lot of places where OPC Ua is better suited in our infrastructure, right? But even when what I'm arguing is that even when we're using OPC Ua, we're still, once we use OPC Ua for what we're using it for, OPC methods, for example, there are no MQTT methods, all right? There's not a method I can run on an object in an MQTT namespace, because none of the things in an MQTT namespace are objects. They're not objects. They are not instances of classes. There are no methods that I can call on those, right? That's an advantage OPC Ua has, right? In terms of if that's going to be valuable. Specifically, it would be something like, get the parent or get the children nodes, that kind of stuff, right? That's valuable if I want to browse up and down the namespace. With MQTT, the browsing I use going up and down a namespace is really through subscription, right? What I do is I basically subscribe to everything, and then I just iterate through as needed, looking for, using regex primarily. I'm using regex to look for patterns, and those patterns are our objects, right? The string patterns are our objects. But over the time that you've had now to prep, what is your take? So if my position is MQTT, or really it's not MQTT, it's broker technology, right? It could be AMQP, it could be JMS, it could be lots of things. Broker technology is really what you need to have in the center of your ecosystem. And even if I'm using OPC Ua on the edge, or I'm even using it to interoperate with my ERP system, I still am going to convert an OPC Ua namespace into an MQTT or AMQP topic namespace. That's the way I'm going to architect it, right? Do you disagree with me that that's going to be an optimal architecture in many cases? Do you agree that that's going to be an optimal? Do we see eye to eye on that piece? Now that you've had a chance to research MQTT more in depth, specifically Sparkplug B, are you closer to my position or further away today than you were, say, a month ago?
Yes, certainly. I would say I am closer. And I would say it depends on specific requirements. What do you want to achieve it at a specific project, and there are a lot of things with MQTT which I like, and I had in my experience some project where I developed proof of concept application to get data from a Modbus or Ethernet IP and publish that over MQTT with Spark B, and this data and as a broker I use Ignition, and I would publish this data, and all that structure of tags would magically appear in Ignition. So I liked that at that point, and it is great, but I would not put like OPC UA against MQTT, like you have to choose one of them. I do not think they are mutually exclusive in the same.
I agree. I definitely agree. They are not mutually exclusive. Yep.
In the same project, you can use both ensembles. You can use OPC UA. And by the way, MQTT is used as one of the protocols in OPC UA PubSub part 14. So MQTT is very great as a protocol, and as you would say, it's scalable, and there are general purpose, I would say, brokers like HiveMQ, EMQX, and with them, they are scalable. And what does it mean scalable, by the way? When we say scalable, it means usually that it's a cluster, right? And it's not just one a server or PC or virtual machine where you run single application. It's a cluster, multiple. And
what we say when we talk about scalable, and I just want to add on that, I agree with you. When I say scalable, what I'm saying is that I can deploy at scale widely without refactoring, without needing, all I have to do is extend, add resources, add a broker to the cluster. I can scale, I can deploy widely at scale. That is scale. We say this all the time. You could build an MES system in just pure .NET and write all your drivers from scratch, and you could do that, right? But the problem is it's going to take too long and cost too much money. And then when they ask you, okay, I love that MES system, I want you to scale it to every one of our facilities. That's not scalable if every time I go to a new plant, I got to write 50 new drivers and I have to build 50 new applications. Scalable is when I'm ready to scale, what I can do is I can configure instead of develop. And that's when I talk about when we're talking about scalability, because again, manufacturers need to transform their businesses quickly or they're going out of business. I mean, I just had a call with a tier 1 automotive supplier this morning that we did a digital transformation maturity assessment for. And we already know we're trying to figure out how to tell that customer that 10 years from now, the company, they will not exist as they do today. And we know that that's an empirical certainty that their organization will not exist as it does today 10 years from now. And they're going to get gobbled up because they cannot scale fast enough. They're starting the journey too late, and they won't be able to scale it fast enough. And competitors are going to come in and just eat them alive. And we have to tell them that. We know that it's an empirical certainty that, the tens of thousands of people who are employed for this company are not going to be employed for this company a decade from now. And we know that. So much of what we're doing is centered around how do we help these companies transform fast, super fast. That's scale. I wanted to show you how we use OPC Ua real quick, and I'll turn it back over to you. That way it provides context for everybody. You can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
So this is the most common implementation, okay, for us. So what we've got here is we've got on the edge, we have two types we have to build solutions for customers that do two things. what do we do with the stuff we have now? So this is all the hardware and software that we have in place. And what are we going to do with the stuff in the future? What's our plan for the hardware and software that we're going to deploy in the future? Okay. The solution is different for both of them. Okay. For the stuff that we have now, the most common implementation is to use OPC. Okay. What we will do is we will use native protocol drivers to talk to these sensors, PLCs, hardware with native access only. And then within the OPC server, so Kepware, Matricon, all those things, right? Ignition is a good example, Factory Studio, all these things that have native protocol drivers, Litmus automation, gazillion examples. And then convert them, create topic namespaces. So create using the OPC information model and create a namespace that we can then subscribe to, or we can browse and subscribe to in our IIoT platform. Okay, so that is all the tags that are in here. We use an OPC client to get it into our IIoT platform that speaks our IoT protocol. And then we basically just convert from the OPC Ua namespace into an MQTT topic namespace. What happens when we do that? Well, we lose a lot of the OPC stuff, right? I mean, we lose the OPC methods, right? We lose any references to the information model. We see the structure of the information model, but we lose any of the add-ons, the extensions of information models, whether those are from companion specs or from the default standard. But in IIoT, that stuff really isn't important for most of us. I mean, for 99% of your applications, what matters is the event and the value. What happened and when did it happen? So what was the value and when did it happen? For in 99% of the applications, that's what matters for IIoT, right? It's getting the data to a central store, right? And so this is the most common implementation. And then what we're doing is on this side, we're using an MQTT broker with a ISA 95 part 2 namespace. And then we've got nodes that plug into it. And what's the future state? The future state is for all the new stuff, we don't buy the things in red. We buy the stuff in blue. Sensors, PLCs, hardware that have native MQTT, ideally Sparkplug B. And by the way, this is our #1 implementation. So you and I are in agreement. OPC and MQTT, they live together. They live together. I want to show. I'll show one other thing in a minute. But they can coexist. They are not mutually exclusive. And I have never meant to say that they are. I don't think I've ever said you choose between MQTT or OPC Ua. What I'm saying is we need to pick the protocol and standard that's optimal. That's what I say. And even on that board back there, I have OPC running. It's just I'm not using it. I would never use OPC to take data from inside my office here and get it to outside my office. I would convert it before I did that.
Okay.
Yep. But anyway, so go ahead. But my point to you, Ravil, is that there are many people within the OPC Foundation. There are many people all around the world who are telling their customers that OPC Ua can be their IIoT protocol, and they're full of shit. I mean, they are full of shit. I build these systems. I'm telling you that's the reason they don't come on this podcast. That's the reason that they're not going to have this debate with me, because they're not building these systems. They're trying to sell something that they made, but they are not building these systems. I mean, I build them. I lead the projects, and I started with OPC Ua. And the problem was you couldn't scale. You kept hitting critical mass over and over and over again. Now, what I will say is this: I started with OPC Ua before Part 14 was completed. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But we have not seen wide adoption of Part 14, right? You would admit PubSub is not something readily available in the market that's easy to determine, oh, that's going to give me PubSub capability and I can go ahead and use that in my. You would admit that it's not widely adopted, right?
No, I cannot admit neither is it adapted or not. I do not possess enough information.
Okay.
But just I see there are some products, but maybe there are more. but it doesn't mean there are or there is no. I cannot state either. So I don't know.
Are you currently using MQTT? I saw that you you do custom development, and I think I read that somewhere that you do.
Yes.
Are you using MQTT in any applications? And if you are, what are they? Where
Yes.
do you use MQTT?
So if we go back to your diagram you just showed before, can you share that screen?
Mm-hmm.
I do not see it yet.
Yep,
Okay.
there you go.
Here you can you see here OPC UA client and then MQTT broker.
Yep.
And you have visual analysis, but if you remove visual analysis, if we leave OPC UA client from one side and MQTT publisher from another side,
yep.
then that's one of the things which our application Agama Visual Layer for OPC does. So it can collect data from OPC UA servers and send to one of the destinations is MQTT broker, but there is no Spark Plug B support right now. It's just MQTT. And it was verified that it works with generic MQTT broker as well as Azure IoT, Amazon, Google Cloud, IBM Watson.
Which product is that right here? So this is the list for those watching.
On the left.
Yeah, for those.
Lager for OPC.
Which one is it? The SDK?
No, to the left from that.
Oh, Visual Logger?
Yeah, this one.
So Ogama has a OPC to MQTT gateway built into it.
Converter, yes.
Excellent. Perfect. Let me ask you this. Here's a common question I get in the OPC world.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you have to make so many OPC products? So if you look at you at OPC at One May Automation, right? You've got Visual Logger for OPC. You've got the C++ client SDK. You've got your UA web client. You have a Process OPC. I'm assuming Process is just a brand name. You're reselling.
Process OPC is another company well known in Europe, located in Finland. We are partner with Process OPC and selling their products in North America.
So if you look at Process, for example, right? They make OPC products. They've got just here, you resell 7 different OPC products for them.
Yes.
In our world, we ask the question, why do I need 7 products? Why? And this is the number one question that comes up over and over and over again. And if you look at, Matt Paris and Jeff Schrader and all the guys who are super active in the community, they're going to ask the same question. And that is, show me the definitive OPC product.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. When you see these products, like how many, it does not mean you have to use all of them or none. It depends on what is your project. For example, if you look at Process OPC UA Modbus server, what it does is it connects to Modbus devices and converts that Modbus into OPC UA. So now any OPC UA client can get data from that. And that is the way how our application can get data from legacy devices supporting Modbus. So we have Agama Visual Layer for OPC. It can connect only to OPC UA. And that was designed, that was by design, because the assumption was very often you would have a PLC with built-in OPC UA, modern PLCs, like a Siemens PLC is 1500. They support both OPC UA and, by the way, MQTT too. So you can you have a choice. But if your device does not support it, then if it's Modbus, then you get that Modbus server, put it and convert it to OPC UA, and you have all the way up to the cloud. And if it's something different, and if it's, for example, Classic COM, then you would put the OPC UA wrapper, which converts Classic to OPC UA, and that way So OPC UA, in my vision, is common denominator in maybe not at the whole enterprise level, but at the shop floor level, machine communication, PLC to SCADA, HMI. At that level, I think OPC UA is where its strength is.
So you and I are in relative agreement there. I believe we're in most agreement there. I think that OPC UA has a place, and it's really on the edge. And when I say the edge, I mean from the plant level down to the plant floor. So from the entity of the plant, the ISA 95 part 1 or part 2 site, right? From that location down to the plant floor is where OPC excels, right? I think that's where OPC methods are most valuable. I think it's where information models are most valuable, especially companion specifications. I don't believe that it's important to have all of the real strengths of OPC UA outside of the plant floor. Okay, I just don't. And in my applications, I don't see the value, right? But here's a fundamental issue that that I have with the OPC community. And let me say this. I'll stop sharing and then come back to it. I have had no fewer than, I'll bet you 50 active members of the OPC Foundation reach out to me. And I've probably talked to another 100 at conferences, et cetera, et cetera. There is not a single example of a person who's had this conversation with me. You're the only one who's willing to have it publicly, right? But there's not a single example of a person who's had this conversation with me who did not, in the end, find out that we actually had consensus. We were in total agreement about where MQTT is strong and where OPC UA is weak, and where OPC UA is strong, where MQTT is weak, right? Here's what it boils down to, right? When OPC UA was written, I think they started writing it in 2000. I think it went from like 2000 and got adopted in 2008 or whatever. Maybe it was 2002 they started writing it. But when OPC UA was written, the OPC Foundation was thinking, we're going to have computers all over the plant floor. Every machine, every production line is going to have a computer running on it. Every PLC is going to be, a Control Logix L8. I think the OPC Foundation was thinking, we're going to have horsepower everywhere on the plant floor, computing horsepower. And so when they were writing the specification and they were making OPC UA so complex, which it is, it's very complex, it's very verbose, right? Because of all the capabilities that they want to provide. They were operating under a flawed assumption. And the flawed assumption was that every PLC is going to have tons of compute power on it. That it doesn't matter that an OPC server requires quite a bit of resources to extract, manage, and serve out 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 objects, right? And we're going to need separate cores to do that. I mean, they were operating under this flawed assumption that you were going to have these massive PCs running on the plant floor. And they didn't assume, I don't think they ever took into account, no, what's actually going to happen is we're going to be focused on really, really small edge PCs using really, really efficient processors that run where the temperature of the processor is far more important than the computational power of that processor, right? I don't think they ever operated under that assumption. And so they were never operating under the assumption that we need to run on lightweight hardware, that we're going to need to run super, super lightweight. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't build an OPC product that is lightweight and runs just as lightweight as an MQTT client. I bet you probably could. I bet you could write an OPC client or even an OPC server, and you could throttle it to limit the number of objects it's going to serve out. And you could get it to run as lightweight as a MQTT client, right? I think you could probably do that. But you're not going to get the same capability, right? For the resources required or the resources that you're going to require to run that lightweight OPC client is not going to give you equivalent capability for the same amount of resources to run the MQTT client. That's why we've seen such wide adoption. You know, I was looking at your LinkedIn. And I saw that you were doing you did a project for a year for GE, building an OPC, helping them build an OPC Ua server for Prophecy. I think it was Simplicity or something, right? Did I get that?
Client part.
Say that again.
It was client part.
Okay, just the client.
Ability to connect to your servers from Simplicity.
Got it. And how long did it take to do that? So when you took Simplicity and you're going to write an OPC client to talk to other OPC Ua servers, how long did that take to do?
Probably roughly 1 year, but that's not all about OPC Ua, and maybe the least part. Of course, I think the least part was about OPC Ua, because you need to understand how Simplicity communication library works.
Right.
It doesn't matter if I was connecting to MQTT. I think if I was writing MQTT support for it, probably it would take the same time, because it's mostly first you need to be familiar how does it look like, this Simplicity thing. Okay, I know how to connect to OPC Ua servers and etc. And then integration doesn't matter. You spend time on that, no matter what protocol. And then configuration. You need to configure all these things. Even if with MQTT broker, you need to configure what is the endpoint, and is it what are will message and whatever, all these messages, and you have to specify quality of service. Which should it be? Maybe you have less a number of parameters. For example, you very rarely maybe configure MQTT client certificate settings, because even it's possible, very often you would not use authentication of the client by certificate, but it would add you one more strength on security if you did that. So if you do that, you will have, so it's a lot of configuration, and then it's testing and all these cycles, and it's building application. A lot of things take time, and then user manual documentation. It's not just we had like working example in a week or a few weeks. We could provide the communication. Here's how it works.
One of the challenges I've had is that if you look back on that board back there, if you look, there's an Easy Rack PLC by Easy Automation. There's a Direct Logics. There's a Control Logics at the bottom. Siemens S7-1200. CMT SVR by Maple Systems. You know, I've worked with many companies on adding in MQTT support for their hardware. Okay, and when they come to us and they say, "Hey, Walker, if we're going to support MQTT with Sparkplug B, what the FreeWave Zoom Edge on there also, right? That's another good example. When they come to me and they say, "Hey, how should this work?" When you say you want us to support MQTT and Sparkplug B, how should it work? I say it's real simple. You need to add a connector on your hardware that allows you to point to an MQTT broker, take the namespace inside your hardware. You guys probably refer to it as your system namespace and then the master data model. Take those two things, turn them into a topic namespace, and publish them to a broker. The longest it's taken anyone to do that is 2 days. So from the moment I had the first conversation with them to when they've had MQTT Sparkplug B support was 48 hours. And now, granted, there's a lot of now, if you go to do that, if I'm going to build an OPC server on there, I'm not doing that in 48 hours, but I'm also getting a lot of things from an OPC server I'm not getting from an MQTT client, right? So I grant that. But the point is that in 99% of our use cases, that's all I need. All I need is report by exception, lightweight, edge-driven updates of the data and the structure inside that thing. I don't need all this other stuff. I don't need alarms and events. I don't need HDA for historical data. I don't need all these other things, right?
Mhm.
So we have a product very similar to your OGamma, right? Where we have a product called the UNS Gateway that I wrote from scratch. And it took me about 3 weeks to write it. So basically what it does is you only have 3 parameters. You set it, you point it to the OPC server. Okay, you point it to this OPC server, authenticate, certify. Then you point it to the broker. And the third setting is this Sparkplug B? Is it not Sparkplug B? That's it. Okay. It took me 16 or 17 days to write the OPC side of it. And it took me 4 hours to write the MQTT side of it. And here's why. Okay. So if I go and I take a look at when I was getting ready to write this, right? So I had to go, I wanted MQTT 3.1.1. So I go and I go ahead and launch the 3.1.1 spec, which is 81 pages, which I read on night 1. And then I went to the Eclipse Foundation. I read the 68 pages for Sparkplug B. Mm-hmm. Here's just, this is just the first, that's a total of 140 pages. Just the first 5 pages or 5 sections of the OPC standard. So part 1 through 5 is over 500 pages. And that's before I ever even get to profiles and data access. And the challenge I think that we face, and this is where the OPC Foundation has got to, when I talk about technical debt, that's what I'm talking about. The problem is the OPC Foundation is doing nothing to actively strip down the standard so that you can get OPC implementations as fast as I can get an MQTT implementation. And the question that I ask people all the time is this: why would I use OPC Ua if I have MQTT available? What's the reason I would use it? And the answer would be, there's some method in OPC Ua that I'm going to need to use. There's some method I want, or I've already got an OPC client that can consume a specific information model from a companion spec, right? And therefore I'm going to be pointed towards OPC Ua. But outside of those 2 use cases for the types of projects we do, I don't see why I would use OPC Ua. And that's what I say. It's like, yeah, it's possible to do these things with OPC Ua, but why would I if I've got MQTT? And what would you go ahead? Sorry.
Okay. First of all, I would like, before I forget, I would like to emphasize that even my company, One Way Automation, is a member of OPC Foundation. I'm not representing whole OPC Foundation here. Nobody knows until now that we are having this conversation from OPC Foundation. It's just everything what I see here. It's my personal opinion. Okay. So now, why would you use OPC Ua instead of MQTT? If you do not see any reason, if you are professional, you manipulate with MQTT very easily. You have requirements for your projects. It does everything you need. No reason for you to use OPC Ua. And here, before, there are a lot of things to cover here. Let's start from OPC Ua is verbose. If you look at, by the way, when as a user, I would suggest you do not spend time on reading as a developer. If you are a developer, I would tell you what I usually recommend. Go over the specifications, but do not read everything. Spend maximum 1 day. Just go, okay, this part is talking about that. Part 4 is about services. Part that. You do not need to read all of them. Even me, I worked with OPC Ua years, and I did not read all of them, I have to admit. And I would say it's similar. How would you like when you work with USB device? You do not read specification when you buy a mouse which connects over USB. You do not read. Oh, by the way, what is the USB specifications? And USB spec, I think, is 600 pages, but you do not need to read that.
Yeah, but it's 600 pages because it's really 3 specs, right? Oh, actually, it's 4. It's really A, B, C, and C with power delivery, right? And if you take out the PD component of USB, take that out. So how do you from USB client, how do you change the power? What's the voltage that's going to come over the line? You take that component out. I mean, that's like half the spec. The USB A, B, C proper, that's like 300 pages. And by the way, USB is so ubiquitous. That's impressive that it's 300 pages. I don't know what the total the OPC specification is. I want to say 2 things. Number one, the fact that you had to qualify, the fact that you had to say, I don't speak for the OPC Foundation, you had to put that out there, says everything I need to know about the OPC Foundation. But hold on, Ravil, the fact that you had to say that says everything I need to know about the OPC Foundation. I don't qualify. I don't have to qualify and say I don't speak for Arlen Nipper or the Eclipse Foundation or Oasis Open when I'm giving my opinions on MQTT. I'm probably the biggest dick on YouTube when it comes to, the industrial automation and Industry 4.0. I'm not a very nice person about this stuff because I really believe that there are many people in our organization who could give a shit whether or not our customers are getting what's best and optimal. I believe that our industry is littered with people who are using their brains and the power that they have to exploit their customers. And I see it with my own eyes. Okay. And so number one, I think I respect that you qualified your statement and said, I don't speak for the OPC Foundation. I know that. We're having this conversation because you objected to something that I said. I have any question you've asked me, I've tried to answer because I believe I have a moral obligation. If I'm going to take a position, I better be able to defend it. Okay. So I respect that you're willing to come on here. So number one, I just think it's screwed up that you even felt like you had to qualify that statement. It says everything I need to know about the foundation. Number two, you're not the only person to tell me that. At least 100 different members of the OPC Foundation have told me privately, at least 100. I agree with everything you're saying, but it's a political body. It's a bureaucratic group. My livelihood is tied to this. Okay. And I can't go pissing them off. And this is including members of huge organizations. So I get it. But let me, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry. I had one other thing, but I wanted to.
Please continue, and then I'll take my turn.
Right. So one other thing. The content that we create, the things that I say on YouTube, the things that we say in LinkedIn, is me giving away my knowledge. It's me giving away the knowledge our team has. Okay, all my companies. I don't know if you know this or not, but I own 49 companies. Okay, I have 5 companies in industrial automation.
Oh,
right.
Cool.
5 companies alone. I own a data science firm. Okay, in addition to this, so we do everything full stack. Okay, I have a total of 1,000 employees globally. Okay, I'm not Joe Schmo from down the street. I have more money than I'll ever be able to spend in my entire life. I am giving away what I have learned. Why? Because I grew up poor. And I grew up poor at a time when manufacturing left the Northeast. And I watched manufacturers leave and all the good jobs go bye-bye. And all my friends,
Yes,
Okay.
somewhere I either read about that or you talked about that in some YouTube. Yes, yes.
Right. I
You
am
live in a trailer at some time, right?
correct.
Okay.
I'm giving this away. What I'm doing is sharing with the community. Hey, gang, here's the secret sauce. If what you really want to do is do what's best for your clients, stop doing this and start doing this. Okay, that's where it all came from. And then, you know, people have come and objected to the things I've said.
Okay.
But we're having this conversation now, and you have moved closer to my position than I have moved closer to your position, correct? There was already
not necessarily. Not
where
necessarily.
do we disagree? Tell me where we disagree. Still.
Okay. So now there were a lot of things here touched. Let's start from is OPC lightweight or no, verbose or not? I started to talk about OPC Ua specification. The thing is, MQTT spec, you say that it's around 100 pages or whatever, and this is only protocol. It's protocol. It's transport, and it doesn't care what is your payload. You just send data from publisher and receive from subscription. And this is much less functionality than OPC Ua covers. And if you look at OPC Ua part 6, which is about transport, how do you create connection? That is only 93 pages, 93. And this is that covers how you encode data and information model, other space model. These are all how you establish a relation, how you describe a relationship between nodes, what types are. That's nothing is covered in MQTT, and a little bit partially covered by Sparkplug, but only a little bit. So it's why you have a whole bunch of these specifications. But when you really need only some of them. You don't, and especially it's about companion specifications. You often mention, for example, companion specification for CNC machines, and then there are for kitchen equipment, there are for devices, and there are a lot of these for plastic molding machines. And the thing is, for interoperability, in the same server, you do not implement both all these companion specs, right? If it's CNC machine, you do not need kitchen equipment there.
So Ravil, if I'm going to use OPC, if I'm going to use OPC Ua in a an industry 4.0 application, here are the parts of the specification at an absolute minimum I will need to read. I'm going to need to read part 1, overviews and concepts, or otherwise I'm an idiot if I don't start at the beginning. I need to read part 2, security model. I need to read part 3, the address space model. I need to read part 4. Likely I need to read part 4, services. I absolutely have to read part 5, information model. And I need to read part 6, mappings. And I would argue you got to read part 8, data access, right? So those
data access, if you need to support more complex subtypes of base data variable.
But you would agree that if you're using OPC Ua, that would be the reason you're choosing. That would be one of the reasons you'd be choosing it. The subtypes included in data access and the core information model in part 5 would be one of the key reasons you were even choosing to use OPC Ua, right? So and that's like 800 pages. Well, what I just listed there is like 800 pages. Yes, you're correct that MQTT
usually you do not read all of them because you do not implement from scratch. You would use some SDK, and they would come with some documentation. And you, as I said, even for developers, I do not suggest spend more than 1 day. Just go through that and then move to SDK documentation.
Maybe that's the reason.
Sample server.
maybe that's the reason it takes so long to build OPC tools, because no one's reading the spec. They're only reading part of it. And
No, who
you know,
build tools? They read all of them.
Okay.
For example, part 6, I had to read because I implemented on the client SDK all how your data is encoded, byte, type, string, float, double, etc. Array, not array, complex type variables, everything as a developer. But my point is, if you use my client SDK, you do not need to spend days. It comes with sample application with all major functionality, connection, browsing, maybe a few hundred lines, but it includes browsing recursively all other space, create subscription, monitor items, read, write, all that. You can just look at how sort of example code client or server looks like and speed up. Okay, so that was about, and of course, I would agree that OPC UA specifications much more, but they cover much more than just MQTT and than just Spark.
Correct. Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Spark plug is like it's like other space model. It just tells you how can you organize your tags, but how do you exactly organize? What will be the tag name? Will you call it temperature or just temp maybe, or room temperature? You are free to that. And then on the payload, there is no any standard. Now
you're talking about an MQTT.
MQTT and Spark plug. Spark plug is just like, it just describes how would you describe types, but it does not define any types.
Right, because and the reason
on your client publisher, you create that, and then your server or consumer, for example, ignition has to subscribe to some topics, and it should figure out, okay, now this is new node, I have to add it here. That logic must be implemented by application anyway, and the same.
No, not when you're using Sparkplug B. So the way that when we're using Sparkplug B,
you can display information maybe. Okay, ignition displays that, but your goal is not just displayed on the screen. Your goal is to do something with that value. Okay, now you have some values coming, and what? You feed it to somewhere.
Right. We write. What we do is we write packages that are designed to make the ecosystem self-aware. So that if that means I'm writing a Python package or I'm writing something in Java that's going to monitor the namespace, and we're going to use regex to look for something in the namespace that something specific. And if we see this thing, a new instance of this thing, then we're going to do something. We're going to go ahead and create this new connection, but all of that's automated. It's once, but let me point this out. One of the things that it's a good thing that there is no specification for the payload. And it's one of the reasons that people go that direction, because there aren't a lot of implementations of companion specifications. There's lots of, you got 20, 21, 22 parts in OPC. You don't see a lot of implementations of the companion specs, those information models. I hate that, by the way. They should be data models. They're not information models, but you don't see a lot of implementations. And the one question I ask the OPC people all the time is this: well, what happens if I've got 3 machines and 2 of them natively implement the companion spec for CNC, and then I got this brand new Mazak that doesn't use the companion spec at all and just serves out the custom namespace using MT Connect with a custom namespace? Well, now OPC, because OPC predefines what the payload is supposed to look like and what the information model should look like, I've got this custom thing, as opposed to with Sparkplug B, I'm able to take a thing that is a companion spec on a machine and flag it as a template. Say, hey, this is an object, this is a template, a data type. Okay. And flag this as a data type. But this one, I can just go ahead and put that empty payload, my custom payload, and send them to the exact same place. But that's neither here nor there. But go ahead.
I got it. Absence of standards can be good in some cases, and it can simplify because you do not comply to anything. And in some cases, conforming to standard might be strength. In some cases, it may be not. And I don't know in how many cases customers want things to be conforming to specific standards, and some cases they don't care.
How do you explain? How would you explain this? I've been using MQTT since, I mean, nearly exclusively our team since 2015-16, right? Where we're using it as the infrastructure. We've been using Sparkplug B 15-16, right? We've never found a use case where it doesn't solve our problem.
Okay. You have very good use cases where you did not need OPC UA, and that's great. But
can you give me an example of a use case that I'm missing? Could you give me an example?
No, I don't know what projects did you have, and you have knowledge about OPC UA and MQTT, and based on that you did choose MQTT. It looks like you did a good decision. But now the objection is not. I'm not saying, oh, why did you use MQTT? It would be better if you used OPC UA. I don't know details of your project, so I cannot tell. But now let's start from standard. The OPC UA specifications are like standards, and as in one of the videos you mentioned, it's created by OPC Foundation members like Microsoft, Rockwell, and there are more than, I believe now it's more than 800 members, if I'm not wrong, and some of them end users and most of them vendors. So you could think maybe there is some influence from big companies here, and the specifications are created with big companies. But I would argue with that one, my small company have the same possibility to see my opinion, and I can come with suggestions, and I can I did not really actively participate in all these specification discussions, but I was a user group member for some time, and I did some small proposals, and some was like discussed and maybe rejected, or some was accepted and went to the specification. So even a small company has the work to see, and that's one. And that's true that you have to be a corporate member in order to be able to discuss specification drafts, to say that yes, here you have to pay in order to, if you want to shape specification. But if you just want to access specifications, these are publicly available. You even don't need to register at OPC Foundation website, and I have links to, they are published online now, free, anybody. That's about openness. It's open, you access specifications without being member. And then,
do you know that? Let me Ravil, real quick.
Let me continue before I forget. And OPC specifications are not just standards created by big corporations. It's not. OPC UA is, you know about IEC organization, International, what is that company name exactly? International Electrotechnical Commission. They have, this is international standards body, and OPC UA specifications are going under number 62541 there. So it's international standard, okay? Governments, at government level, it's accepted, members, almost all countries are members. There are representatives in the IEC. So OPC UA Foundation is international standard, and in some countries it's a national standard. Like China, you know that, right? China adopted it as a government level. This communist regime, they picked, they did pick OPC Ua for some reason. They did not pick Spark B, and you can hate them for that. But this is, and another is South Korea. South Korea, they don't have a communistic regime. It's not North Korea. South Korea, they have OPC Ua as a international, their national standard. And Germany,
are you using you're not, don't tell me that you're using the fact that China chose OPC Ua over Sparkplug B and South Korea chose OPC Ua over Sparkplug B as an argument for OPC Ua is quote unquote the better standard. Because
I just think it's recognized as a standard at international level, and I am not saying it was chosen. I'm not telling the give preference or Sparkplug B, because I don't know, did they consider it or not? Maybe they consider. In order to say they preferred over Sparkplug B, I have to know they consider Sparkplug B.
Yeah, I don't pay a whole lot of attention.
I don't know that.
I don't pay
Sparkplug B also government level standard. Maybe.
I don't pay attention. I don't pay attention to what governments decide in terms of what's effective. What I do is I look at the companies that solve problems, real world problems, most effectively. And if you look at those,
I got it.
If you look at those companies,
in your projects, it was efficient, it was quick, it was 1.6 million comparing to 100 million, and it works. It's good.
So what are we arguing? What are we arguing about then? Isn't that the goal?
The arguing is, you say that OPC Ua is not open.
It's not open. So
now I go to what is
OPC Ua is not open.
So what I understand as open, I go to macmillandictionary.com and open. It says, 1, when public can visit; 2, when you can see inside, not blocked, not covered, honest, anyone can see, join, considering suggestions, when something can be done and possible. I think OPC Ua conforms to all these definitions.
It is not. It's not open. I want to go. I want to go back to the corporate member thing real quick.
But we don't have too much time.
I want to. This is an important point. It's actually an important point. So let's go back to the corporate member part. So you have to be a corporate member to have a voice at OPC. Okay, that is if you want to drive this.
To shape, if you say, for example, you have to rewrite pops up, you have to member of corporate member of OPC Foundation.
Yeah, we call that pay to play. We call that pay to play in the United States, right?
But also there is also, if you don't want to spend money to be a corporate member, there is a forum, and you can just register for free at OPC Foundation website and enter in your suggestion over there. Like, I want pops up for rewritten. Here's my proposal. Do it this way.
So Ravil, here's what I find. This is the biggest challenge I have. And let me say this: I have a ton of respect for you. Not only do you know the spec really, really well, not only are you willing to voice your opinions and come on here, right? I have a lot of respect for you as a developer, as a business owner. Okay. Do I have respect for the OPC Foundation? Absolutely not. I don't have to say anything nice about them because they haven't done anything to earn my respect. I think the OPC Foundation should be ashamed of themselves with how bad they fucked the specification up. And right now there are people watching this video. Thousands of people are cheering with what I just said. Okay. Thousands of people. Okay. Including. Hold on. Let me finish
about that.
Let me finish. So the corporate member piece. Okay. When the United States, when we first ratified our Constitution in 1787, the only people who had a voice in the United States were white men who owned land. Okay. Right. That is the people who were who were white men who were property owners. That just because there are people who could go out onto the street and talk to a white man who owned land, who owned property, and hopefully we can convince him to change the way he votes, that is not participation. That is not open participation. This last Saturday, I was in a phone call. I was in a 2-hour session that included, I don't know, remember if you were on there or not, but Arlen Nipper, who's the co-inventor of MQTT, who wrote the Spark-Plug-B specification and then turned it over to the community, was on a 2-hour session on a Saturday morning teaching our community all about MQTT. Arlen has more money than I do. He's one of the few people I run across who is richer than I am. He has no reason to be on that call on a Saturday morning. None whatsoever. He also doesn't have a financial interest in it. Okay. But what Arlen said to me in an email that he sent afterwards, it was, you let me know how I can help. That whole conversation on Saturday was him really explaining what MQTT is and then soliciting input from the community to steer back to Eclipse. And he also said to me, you know, your call when you said to your community, hey guys, join the Spark-Plug-B user group, right? People are not paying to join that group. They're joining the group. Okay. There's the OPC Foundation. There's many reasons that the OPC Ua spec, which while great intentions to begin with, is a mess. Okay. It's an absolute mess. You made the argument, well, it may have worked for you because it cost you $1.6 million and took you a year or 18 months to build this world-class, the biggest project in the world, when the OPC quotes were all in the $50 to $100 million range. Well, isn't that the fucking point? Isn't the point to do it cheaper, faster, more efficiently, and more optimally? Isn't that what we're trying to do? And at the end of the day, if Stefan wants to come on here and go, I don't have a problem with OPC being less efficient, and I don't have a problem with OPC being pay to play for the big companies. You cannot come on here and tell me that Rockwell and Microsoft are not driving the damn specification. There's no way I'm letting you off the hook on that one. I mean, I respect you, but I'm not letting you off the hook. Rockwell and Microsoft drive the spec. And if you think you have a voice, I feel sorry for you because you don't have a voice. Okay, you don't. You can go ahead and speak, but you're no more than the guy who walks out into the street, the non-landowning guy who walks out into the street and begs the white landowner to vote a certain way. That's your voice. My voice is real impact, though. That's what I need, and that's what our customers need. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
As I said, I made very small proposals, and they were accepted. Some I think, I don't remember exactly. There were many, but I did not feel anything like I was like judged. Oh, you are too small to talk. It's not like that. At least in my opinion.
Excellent.
So I don't have such experience. So we did not talk about a lot of things. So what I do not agree, let me quickly because we already
we got about 8 minutes left.
We are approaching the end of the meeting. So I do not agree that it is not open. For me, it's open. And it's
you're a paying member of the OPC Foundation.
It doesn't matter. Even I was not paying, I would say the same thing because I can access specifications. There are open source versions of SDKs. You have everything to work with OPC Ua. Okay, so that's about openness. So now next is OPC. You said that OPC Ua is not lightweight. I did some comparison with my application, Ogama Visual Lager for OPC. And on that one, I see that MQTT traffic is higher. It's higher. Let me look
That's absolutely, it's empirically impossible.
No, it's possible. I was surprised. And so these 24 tags, in my case, we are taking something a little bit more than 500 kilobytes. One of the reasons is because it transfers server timestamp and source timestamp. So in MQTT, you do not have that. It could be smaller, but anyway. And when I tried to push to the MQX running in the cloud, I had 7 megabytes for some reason. And then I looked at what is going on here. And it was, I had a lot of network TCP packets being retransmitted. And then, okay, I thought, and not it's secured communication. And then I did set up local MQX with secured connection, and I got 2.2 megabytes. And by the way, here I was not just publishing, but I had also a subscriber. So it was again more than OPC UA.
It's not possible. I'll need to look at your test and show you where it's wrong. It's literally empirically impossible. The only way that you could get more transmission with MQTT, okay, the only way is if the rate was different, the tags that you were sending were different. It's literally physically impossible.
No, the same, but
it's empirically impossible. Here, let me
my results. And I mentioned.
Well, I mean, here are the results, and anyone can test my benchmarking. Okay, so this is a real world use case. I didn't just state this. I gave everyone the screenshots. I showed you exactly how we're doing this test. This is an apples to apples comparison of OPC UA to MQTT, not even using Sparkplug B, and originally using no compression.
Number 3 here says MQTT is PB.
Say that again. No. I initially no Sparkplug B. So I ran the test multiple times. So we did Sparkplug B to broker transmission for 5 minutes, no compression. Sparkplug B to broker transmission for 5 minutes with compression, and initially MQTT 311 flat. So
long story short, in my case, even I remote subscriber, even I switch it to non-secure mode, it was still higher than OPC UA. That was in my case.
How do you explain that?
So I would, it's easy to explain, I think, because OPC UA uses binary transmission, and in MQTT it is not. But even then, I tried also to before I was like composing payload as a JSON, like it would have a value column and value, and then
key value pairs.
And then I removed this. I just, as a payload, I left just value without tilling. Even then, it was more than OPC UA. So I do not completely understand. But the thing is, in every message, I was publishing one value for one topic. Maybe there is some way to combine them all together, like in Sparkplug B. I don't know. But that's what I get. I could not reproduce. I could not get the same results you were getting. That's the point.
Well, first off, you told me in Discord, you told me something different. What you said in Discord, what your statement was in Discord was, yes, I concede that it was 30% less. You said, it was like 400 bytes.
What I said,
what you said was yes, MQTT is more lightweight than Sparkplug B is, but that doesn't make, than OPC UA is, but that doesn't make OPC UA heavyweight. Yes, you did. I have the message here.
Not exactly like that. What I told was I get a little bit better results for OPC UA when I excluded timestamp. And I said I did not measure for Sparkplug B, but I said maybe if you use Sparkplug B compression, then maybe you will have less payload size. And that was what I told.
I'm telling you, I would like to see your test methodology, and then let me reproduce it.
Yes.
What I can tell you is this: is that I'll say this in an absolute statement for the whole world to hear. What you just said is not possible. It is literally empirically impossible. And
Okay,
that does, and that's before you even get to Sparkplug B. That's before you even get to Sparkplug B with compression and aliases. What you just described is not possible. I'm not lying. And I'll stake my career. I'll stake my career on it. I'll stake my career. It's not possible. Okay. But all you have to do is read the standard.
That's why I was asking what was the methodology, and
yeah.
I think one of the things you did not count, maybe you were considering only publish, right? Is that true?
No.
You had publish and subscribe.
Publish and subscribe. Yep. So what I was doing, I was actually monitoring both and then aggregated them together. So what I was doing was publishing to the broker, and then I was subscribing to the full topic namespace coming back down. Same thing with OPC Ua. I had a simulator running on this side to basically create a publish subscribe, so that I would read the tags and then I would write the new values over OPC to the namespace, and then I would see the update. I actually did it both ways. I did it one way, so just subscribing with OPC, just subscribing to MQTT, and the second step was publish subscribe. And by the way, it's an exponential increase with publish subscribe. It wasn't that it got heavier with OPC. It got heavier with OPC using when I was writing to the tag values. So the difference was even larger. But let me say this, and that was before I ever got to Sparkplug B and using aliasing. So the one thing you'll see with Sparkplug B, and I don't know how long you ran the test, is when you first make your connection, your Sparkplug B connection, you publish everything, the full namespace, and you publish everything, the full namespace in ASCII. I mean, it's literally a string. That's on the birth. And then the broker deciphers it, and now you're going to report by exception. And if you turn aliasing on, what happens now is I don't say publish to this string payload. I say publish to alias 1, and the broker says, but go ahead.
I got it, but what I'm telling is what I got, and with Sparkplug B, I would expect that it's binary too. I would expect the same results comparable with OPC Ua without compression, and if you use compression, maybe it will be lower. That's my expectation.
So we're 2 minutes over, so I want to make sure we end on a positive note. So,
but before going that, we did not talk about report by exception.
Yep.
So in the lightweight, in some cases, comparing to a Sparkplug B with compression, it might be a little bit heavier, but I would not say it's heavy prohibitively that you cannot afford it goes over. And with MQTT, by the way, when you create a lot of wildcard subscriptions from different subscribers, you will lose that advantage maybe, because you will have a lot of data changes which this subscriber is not interested, but all that attributes to the network load. I suspect in some cases you have network overload in MQTT if you widely use wildcard subscriptions. MQX, I think, does not allow wildcard like that dash symbol. You cannot subscribe, just it would not return to you anything, because then it will blow your network. That's about lightweight. And now report by exception. Report by exception. You very often say MQTT is report by exception. MQTT has, in fact, nothing to do with the report by exception. I just tried to publish the same value again from from publisher. I was getting the same value again in the subscriber. So
that's because
broker does not check if the value is changed or not.
That's because
So
you
it's not
that's
property
because
of
you
MQTT. It's
that's
not
because
property.
that's because you implemented your client incorrectly. So if you look at
Yes, that's all about the client. It's the client implementation where you
it's the
implement that logic report by exception.
right. It's the MQTT.
OPC UA servers, it's defined in the spec how you report by exception.
It is MQTT. It is MQTT client specific. Here's why. If you
implement client, if you do not check value changed or not, if you and even change, if your sensor is very sensitive, you will have every measurement different. In the 0.1234, number 6 or 7 after point, you have something changing. And then
if you implement an MQTT client that publishes the same value more than over and over and over again, you implemented your client incorrectly. So what you are describing now, what you probably did here was you probably used like MQTT Explorer, which is a debug tool. You probably used a open client that you downloaded to do that, but that's a debug tool. That is not an MQTT client. That is not an industrial MQTT client. It's certainly not a Sparkplug B client. Though, yes, but can I write?
The thing is, report by exception is not defined by MQTT, and MQTT has nothing to do with report by exception. It's all about how you implement your client.
Well, of course. I mean, but what you're arguing here is that
but in OPC UA, it's defined by the specification. How often you take the reading, that's sampling interval, and then you define the filter. I want to report when values change it, when status change it, when timestamp change it. You have all the freedom there, and then you can even define a dead band. I want to report when temperature changes more than 0.1 degree or 1% from the range. That's true report by exception defined by the spec as a OPC specification.
That is horseshit. What you just said is horseshit. You just said no, it was horseshit. What you just said is horseshit.
Why?
because what you just did was you led the viewers to believe that OPC UA is report by exception. It is not. It is
if you use subscriptions.
If right, yeah, that's my point. And which I stated in the beginning.
Almost every server implements support for subscriptions.
But
it's not pops up regular.
Understood. But the client then what if you do that? The client has to know what to subscribe to.
Yes, and why it's a problem?
Well, it's not edge driven that way.
But in the same way as ignition, for ignition, it also requires some effort development to detect change and publish. With OPC UA, you can do that too. You can subscribe if your server supports that for changes in the other space. If it doesn't support, you can periodically maybe browse other space and you can discover changes. It's doable. Maybe with MQTT it is easier, but it's not something not doable. And
well, I just said in the beginning, I could build a server client communications tool in .NET if I want to, and an MES system on top of it, but I can't do it for the cost, the time, and with the efficiency and at scale like I can using MQTT. I mean,
it's all about requirements. And one more thing, which was edge-driven report by exception, lightweight. We covered that, and I see some cases when MQTT might be not suitable. For example, I asked at the HiveMQ webinar recently, what is the fastest time to transfer data from publisher to subscriber? The broker, MQTT broker, is middleman, right? When you have middleman, you have overhead, right? You have to pay for that, and that's the delay. And this is with HiveMQ, the small delay might be 50 milliseconds.
Correct. I would
When
say
I
that's
tried-
accurate. I would say that's accurate. In fact, I wouldn't do 50 milliseconds. My SLA for round trip, so that is from event to client, I would say anything 500 milliseconds and higher, we're not using MQTT for that, or anything 500 milliseconds and lower. And by the way, that's how we're going to use OPC Ua there. In fact, we're probably not going to use OPC Ua. We're probably going to use field bus for half millisecond and lower.
Yes,
but I agree with you 100%. By the way, I would never spec in 50 milliseconds for using MQTT. Never. I would never.
Yeah.
I would never rely on MQTT for 50 milliseconds. Never in a million years. I would use field bus or something like that.
Yes, this is one limitation, and another is, I think, the security. I looked at how you define UNS, and you would like enterprise line.
ISA 95 part 2. Yeah,
and
ISA
then,
95 part 2.
Yeah, and then in order to have integration with ERP, EMS, you would have there, like you have temperature at the very low, and then to pass ERP information, you would have under that subtopic ERP for EMS. For me, it looks like very, very hard to maintain security this way, because you want to ERP, just ERP is able to write, and somebody has only read access.
You do it through groups. You do it through groups using ACLs. So you group clients, and then you use access control lists to limit read, write, or subscribe, publish capabilities by topic namespaces. Not even specific topics, but topic wildcard, which is how we architect it.
And you also mentioned that historical values can be published. I see it's very limited. You mentioned that for 24 hours you can, but then again, what should be the time window you need?
Wait, say it again.
Historical
the unified namespace is not meant to be a historical store. It's not meant for historical data. And the unified namespace is the structure of the business in the current state. In the OPC Ua world, they call it digital twin, yada, yada, yada. In our world, we call that current state of the business. So if I look at the unified namespace at any given time, and I look at any topic and I compare two topics together, I'm comparing them in the now. I'm not comparing them, what were they historically? We use a historian node to do that. So if I want to go ahead and compare topic A with topic B, we do that through a historian node. Now,
that's somewhere I saw that you were like considering that if you want to transfer history over MQTT, then you can have under temperature history for the last 24 hours.
Yeah, but what we'll say there is, let's say I'm going to plot the history of a temperature on a spark line on a screen. There may be a scenario where I say, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and query for the historical data for the last 24 hours for that temperature and put it in a data set inside of the payload as a data set inside of a topic, and I'll render it from there. But people ask this question, what do we do about the history? That's for the historian node that's plugged into the unified namespace. The difference is the goal with the unified namespace is to create a single source of truth. So take all the various master data models we have everywhere, okay, and unify them. So if I go into the ERP, you're an ERP guy, right? Go into the ERP and look at the master data model in the ERP from the ORM, right? That is one model. And then I go to the CMMS or the EAM software. There's a different master data model. I got a unique ID over here. I got a unique ID over there. For every piece of software, I've got a master data model and a unique ID. But guess what? I've got the same thing for hardware too. Hardware's got node IDs. Hardware has master data models inside of them, even if those master data models are in tables. And we have to unify that together, right? It's when you look at what it is that companies want to achieve, they want the Holy Grail. And the Holy Grail is closed loop control of the business. Like OPC Ua was focused on control of processes. It was focused on process control, right? That's what OPC is, OLE for process control. Well, guess what? Process control isn't the only thing we have in our business. If the third industrial revolution was the automation of processes, if there was automation of the machines on the plant floor, the fourth industrial revolution is the automation of business processes. The first thing we have to do in order to automate business processes is put the data, the structure of the data, into one place. All right. That's the first thing we have to do. That's what the unified namespace does. MQTT makes that much easier, but we don't use MQTT. It's not the only brokering technology we use. We use many brokering technologies. MQTT just happens to be the one that we use the most. And the reason why is because it's edge-driven, lightweight, report by exception, open architecture. I know that you're taking the position that OPC is lightweight. You're taking the position that it is edge-driven, and you're taking the position it's report by exception. And I'm telling you, it isn't. It is. You can make OPC report by exception. I've never said that you can't. But what I've said is that that is not an absolute statement. It is not always report by exception, even if you do it to the spec. If you write an
MQTT client, you can make it not reporting by exception.
If you did that, you would do it wrong. I mean, just because I could write the code to do that doesn't mean that that's part and parcel of the standard or the spirit of the standard. You would have done it wrong if you did that. Now, the only reason that they don't put in the standard that you have to go report by exception is because if I'm going to be edge driven and I want to drive a heartbeat, okay, I want to use a topic for a heartbeat, I'm going to send the same fucking payload over and over and over again. And we got to allow ourselves to do that. We have to give ourselves the permission to take a topic and publish it over and over and over again if I wanted to create a heartbeat. That's the reason they didn't write that into the spec. However, if you write your MQTT client so that it publishes all the topic namespace, not report by exception, you did it wrong. And anybody who uses MQTT is going to say, why are you doing that? Fix your software. That's the first thing they're going to do. Okay.
I know in OPC Ua, report by exception is a rather rule. It's common than exception. So it's not true to say.
But no, it isn't. No, it isn't, because you have to not be edge driven. You have to not be edge driven with OPC Ua to get report by exception. That's the problem. You have to know. You have to know the variables you want to subscribe to, which has to be instantiated. You have to know them.
But as I said, there is no problem. And I also see some security risk when you say you just add the device and then it just appears. I think.
What is the security risk?
Then I'll have a whole bunch of cheap devices and then come to your plant and just leave them there who are battery powered, and they will start to connect your MQTT broker. And then what happens? A broker have to somehow identify, and probably some operator have to authorize.
Well, you certify and authenticate the connection. You don't just let any client publish. I mean, if you leave it open,
even if it appears in the other space, you can see it. Maybe somebody has to authorize. Okay, let's use it here, or maybe just ignore it. I don't know, but just blindly accept every connection. And
but we don't do that. What would happen is a machine builder comes in and they're going to run off a machine, right? They put it on the plant floor. What we do is we give them a group ID, and we give them a edge node ID, and we give them permission. Point to this broker. Okay, here's your username and password.
Credentials or here's your certificate, maybe, right?
Yeah, here's your certificate. Okay, we give them the certificate. You have to authenticate, and you're going to publish into this group ID and this edge node ID. And when they turn it on, it authenticates, it certifies, and they start streaming. But yeah, you don't allow somebody to just come in and anybody connect to the broker. No, you have to authenticate that. You got to certify that. Yeah, so I don't. In fact, I would argue it's more secure because there's no inbound ports open. You don't need to open any inbound ports. It's all edge driven. I don't have to have an engineer up at the server configuring things to get get things back and forth. Let me, before we get off, let me do this one last thing here. I just want to highlight this. So, you know, I went through and I went and looked at, you know, OPC architectures, right? And, you know, this is actually a really good representation of what a OPC UA infrastructure looks like most of the time, even if the engineer who is integrating it doesn't want it to look this way. This is not hub and spoke. This is point-to-point linear integration, right? One of the things that OPC UA misses, okay, is the assumption is this is the ISA 95 part 1 MOM specification, right? So level 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. One of the problems that you have with these integrations is that we fail to understand that as we move up the stack from field level to control level to supervisory level, you know, OPC argues that you should have a OPC server at each of these levels, you know, and use aggregators, you know, distributed aggregators, which I'll get to in a minute.
You can have aggregator, yes, true.
Yep. And one of the things that's most important is there is context that gets added at each of these levels. So this is the control level is your HMI level, supervisory level is your SCADA level, planning level is your MES, management level is your ERP, right? There is context that gets added to your operation at each level of this stack. And that is context that you have to get back down to the edge. And by that, I mean, there's information from the ERP system that we want to get back down to this client that may be a function of a value that changed on the field level first. Okay. Now, all of that's achievable with OPC UA, but it is not achievable edge driven. That is, I have to do engineering at multiple levels to provide that context back to the plant floor. Okay. I have to go to multiple levels of OPC to do the engineering. Okay. As we go through and we take a look at all of the structures of, you know, you use the term, you know, what you said in one of your posts was, you know, yeah, I'll give it to you. MQTT is simpler, you know, yeah, it's more lightweight than you're changing the lightweight argument here, which is my position is it's empirically impossible. I'd love to see the testing methodology so I can prove that. But the third step is, you know, you would say it might be a little faster, right? It might not take you as long to integrate it because it's simpler. Well, my argument is, isn't that the point, right? I mean, look at the OPC UA stack, okay? You know, just to achieve most of this, you got to read at least 800 pages of spec. You would argue, don't read the spec, just go to the SDK. I think that's terrible advice. Look at this from sensor to cloud. This is from the OPC UA. This is from the OPC Foundation. This is their own architecture for how to take data from a sensor level and get it to the cloud. Okay, I am a world-class solutions architect, and I don't fucking understand what's on that sheet. I don't get that. Okay, when I look at, you know, but here's the thing: when you talked about data aggregators, this is what OPC looks like at scale. And as you scale out and you add more and more consumer clients, you end up with more and more messy as red lines, right? And OPC's solution to this is, let's use a central aggregator. Okay. Let's create a broker. That's the argument, right? Let's create a broker.
It's exactly, you would put MQTT broker with MQTT transport. With OPC UA, you put integration server or federation server or gateway server, whatever you call it.
Yep. And what I would say is, show me that. Show me the products I have running down here. Show me this product. And show me those products. And what I would say is, this is MQTT. Okay. If OPC UA alone is saying, you know, for us to solve our problems and go to brokering technology, we're going to recommend, by the way, Pub Sub Part 14 recommends MQTT, gives you many options, but recommends MQTT for the transport. Okay. If OPC UA is going to recommend MQTT for transport, then why don't I just go ahead and use the specification that's written by the guy who invented MQTT for industrial data instead of using the OPC UA specification? If even OPC UA, the OPC Foundation, is trying to achieve what is already natively possible just using MQTT? That's my question. And that's what I brought up over and over and over again. And you know what's happened? It's actually kind of sad. People who have a financial interest in the status quo of OPC are the only people who raise objections to me. Engineers who actually do these projects, production engineers, manufacturing engineers, controls engineers who actually do these projects, they're not objecting. Eric Barnstadt, Stefan Hopp, Ravil Nugmanov, and a couple of other ones who have raised objections all have a financial interest in the OPC status quo. And the people who do these projects, the several thousand people we have in our Discord server, the 30,000 or so viewers that we have all over the world, they don't have a financial interest, and therefore they have no problem walking away from OPC and moving and working towards MQTT, including guys like John Rinaldi, who are listed on the OPC UA Foundation's website as OPC experts. Okay. And that's my point. We're 55 minutes over. Let me say this, Ravil. I truly enjoyed this. And I want anybody who's watching this podcast to do not assume in any way, shape, or form that I do not have anything but the utmost respect for Ravil. This was a spirited discussion. I've heard there's a couple things you did bring up I want to look at and make sure I want to specifically the security thing you brought up. I want to make sure that I address that, because that's the idea that we're just going to leave a broker open and we're not going to authenticate and certify. That's ludicrous. We're not suggesting that. And I want to make sure that that's clear to the community, and if you came to that conclusion, I want to make sure somebody else doesn't come to that conclusion. The other thing is, I would like to see your testing methodology and how you did come up with, OPC being lighter weight than MQTT. That's just simply not true. And by the way, our testing methodology has been peer reviewed by more than 250 different engineers. So our tests have been peer reviewed by more than 250.
But I could not find a methodology.
What do you mean? I sent you a breakdown of how to set the test up. You should have received it either in.
Maybe I'll double check that.
Okay.
But methodology.
And I'll email you another copy.
To exactly reproduce and get the same numbers. That's how measurements are made. And
I'll send you another copy of the testing methodology. Okay. But our tests have been peer reviewed by more than 250 engineers. So, and by the way, the first
themselves too.
Say that again.
Did they run these tests themselves too?
Yes, they ran. And the very first peer review was Jonathan Hoddle. So if you go and look at Canary Labs, if you look at Canary's blog, and there's a guy named Jonathan Hoddle, is I don't remember who he works for now, but Jonathan Hoddle, he's part of the Spark-Plug-B working group. He was the first person to peer review our testing. At the time, he was running a major project, and Jonathan was here in Dallas. He was already using MQTT for a really long time. So, but he was the first person. If you go to Canary Labs blog post about MQTT, where they show, they're comparing OPC, Modbus RTU, serial, all that stuff, HTTP, the whole nine with MQTT. That was the first test. He peer reviewed our test. He recreated what the conclusions that we came to. And then this second round of testing, which I did about 4 months ago, has been peer reviewed by more than 250 engineers. So I know that there's some issue. Now let me say this. Maybe you created a use case where where OPC might be lighter weight. I've not been able to create that. And I've been doing this testing for 6 or 7 years. So
the same data types, just in one place instead of integer 16, I did choose GUI type variable, but it would not make a lot of difference, I think.
Let me say this. I think this conversation will be very valuable to the community. It'll certainly be entertaining. I hope that you remain a member of the community, because I really appreciate everything you post.
Yeah, I'll answer any questions people on OPC UA have the same way as you share your knowledge. I'm happy to share my knowledge about OPC UA.
And I definitely want to try out your OGamma tool. And I would, and if you've got if your OGamma tool does OPC to MQTT gateway
Yes, it does.
transformation, then I definitely want to test it. Can I download it for free? I don't have to, or do I need a development license or something to try it out?
Community version, community edition is free, and you get the license through online store, but you don't enter credit card information and etc. And during 1 month, it will be like enterprise edition with all the features, and after 1 month, 64 tags you can use it to lock 64 tags.
Perfect.
Up to. For
Awesome. Any parting comments, questions, concerns before we call it a session?
And I would like to thank you. And I am a small company. I don't own. You say it's 49 companies or
49? Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you very much for organizing this meeting. And I just wanted to make sure that people have a good understanding about both MQTT, Sparkplug, and OPC UA. And
What I think would be really cool is if we did a development project together where you maximized, you built the ideal OPC architecture, and then I just extend it the way we always do with MQTT. We did it that way, so that you could show people how they should be setting up their OPC UA architectures to get the most out of them.
I'm not sure, do I possess enough knowledge about that? But we can look at, we can come from some use case, artificial use case, like you are given this, and you have this task, and how would you do that?
Yeah. A couple things, Ravil. There's some stuff I said in here.
Sorry.
If we pull anything out, it's only going to be me insulting somebody. So, all right.
Okay.
All right. As long as you're,
I'll be okay. I am not destroyed.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you for that.
No, you did a great job, Ravil. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.